Hi everyone, it's Yukimi. Welcome back to the Zainichi Music Project Podcast. I know it's been several months since the last episode and I hope you're doing well. I want to begin by explaining where the project is now, why I paused, and what this next phase of the series will focus on. The pause was not because the project stopped. It was because the direction of the project shifted, and I needed some time to reflect on what the Zainichi Music Project is becoming. When I first began Zainichi Music Project, I imagined it mainly as a music-centered project, commissioning new music, interviewing composers and scholars, presenting performances, and eventually creating a documentary-style film. That original version is still there, and it was important. It helped me define the subject, Zainichi Korean history, identity, memory, and dialogue. But as I continued reading, writing, and thinking, I realized that this project needed a little bit more integrated form. It is now becoming an interdisciplinary artistic work that brings together piano performance, spoken narrative, recorded dialogue, research, multimedia, and newly commissioned musical material. Music is still central, but it is now part of a larger inquiry into history, memory, identity, and lived experience. So this episode is a reset. If you are new to this podcast, or if you would like to revisit the basics of who Zainichi Koreans are and why this history matters, I encourage you to listen to the previous episodes first. In those episodes, I introduced the definition of Zainichi, the historical conditions that created the community, the experience of carrying two names, and the question of statelessness. From this episode through the next several episodes, I will be working closely with Professor John Lee's article, The Korean Diaspora in Japan. I am using his article as a framework, not as a script. I will take selected ideas from his writing and place them in conversation with my own questions as a third-generation Zainichi Korean born and raised in Japan. Professor John Lee is a Korean-American sociologist and scholar of East Asia whose work focuses on migration, nationalism, identity, and Zainichi Koreans. What I find valuable in his writing is that he does not reduce Zainichi history to one simple story. That matters because Zainichi Koreans do not share one single experience. Experiences differ by generation, class, gender, politics, family history, citizenship status, degree of assimilation, and relationship to Korea, Japan, and the diaspora. My story is one Zainichi story among many. It reflects my experience, but it does not represent everyone. At the same time, individual stories are shaped by larger historical forces. This is where American sociologist C. Wright Mills' idea of the sociological imagination becomes important. The sociological imagination means understanding the relationship between personal biography and broader history. In simple terms, it shows that personal struggles are often connected to larger historical forces. This idea became deeply relevant to me as I read Professor Lee's writing. I remember feeling that some of the confusion I had carried for years finally had a structure around it. The questions I had about names, belonging, family silence, and why certain parts of our identity felt difficult to speak about were not simply private issues or personal confusion. They were connected to larger historical conditions. Some of those struggles were visible, like economic status, employment, housing, legal status, and social treatment. Others were less visible, like psychological pressure, emotional burden, family silence, and the feeling that certain parts of our identity had to be managed carefully. John Lee's writing helped me understand that questions about names, belonging, passing as Japanese, and family silence are connected to larger histories: Japanese colonial rule over Korea, migration, post-war nationality laws, alien registration, assimilation pressure, ethnic discrimination, and the idea of Japan as a homogeneous nation. That was an important realization. I was not only reading about a historical group, I was beginning to understand my own questions and my family's experiences as part of a broader historical context. The more I read, the more I understood that Zainichi identity cannot be explained through one clean narrative. It is shaped by contradiction. Zainichi Koreans were connected to Japan through colonial rule, but after the collapse of the Japanese Empire, many were treated as foreigners. Many were born and raised in Japan, spoke Japanese, and lived within Japanese society, but were still marked as Korean. Some maintained strong Korean identities. Some identified more closely with Japan. Some passed as Japanese. Some used Japanese names publicly and Korean names privately. Some rejected assimilation. Others saw assimilation as necessary for survival. These differences matter. If this project is going to be honest, it has to hold that complexity. So in this next phase, I am approaching the material through 3 lenses: memory, empathy, and critique. Memory, because this history often comes through family stories, silences, names, and fragments. Empathy, because people made choices under real pressure. Passing, silence, assimilation, or name changes were sometimes survival strategies. Critique, because the systems that created exclusion and pressure must be named clearly. My purpose is to ask 2 questions. First, what happened? Second, how was this history experienced by the people who lived inside it? That second question is where the artistic side of Zainichi Music Project enters. Facts, dates, laws, and historical evidences matter. I want this project to be historically responsible. But this project is also concerned with lived experience. A law may tell us what someone's legal status was, but it does not fully explain how that status shaped a child's sense of belonging, for example. A name on a document may tell us how someone was registered, but it does not fully explain what that name meant inside a family, at school, or in public life. This is why music, spoken narrative, recorded dialogue, and performance matter to this project. Music is not decoration for history. Music is part of the method. It allows the project to work with tension, silence, ambiguity, and unresolved feeling. In this episode, through episode number 11, I will use Professor Lee's article as a doorway into questions about colonialism, migration, citizenship, alien status, assimilation, names, passing, silence, and belonging. The goal is not to tell my story for its own sake. The goal is to use my position as a third-generation Zainichi Korean to examine how biography and history intersect. This is the purpose of this next phase of Zainichi Music Project. Thank you for listening. I am Yukimi Song, and this is the Zainichi Music Project. Until next week.